good to go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicole. You are a woman of many talents that I definitely do not have regarding technology. So we appreciate all of your help with this. So my name is Jessica Lertora. I am an employee of 0 to 3. I work as the community coordinator for Maryland's only Safe Baby Court Team program. And prior to that, I was a child welfare worker within our county in Maryland. And then prior to that, I had the opportunity to work with Kay and her team at the University of Maryland with little kiddos and their families ages 0 to 5. And so we're excited to be here with you guys today. And I'm going to kind of kick things over to Kay and kind of let her give you guys a sense of who she is. And then we'll go ahead and get started.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us, Nicole. I'm actually subbing in for my colleague, Bree Fellows, who's our clinical program director, and I'm the executive director of the Tagi Matarasi Center for Infant Studies. So our program's been around for 38 years, and we're the only local public mental health team that really focuses on children and their families under the age of 6. And we recently got a grant from the Victims of Crime Assistance and also through the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. And some of the strategies we'll talk about today are related to that. So I'm a social worker and a mental health clinician. So I'm very happy to be here with you.
Awesome. So, and please, Kay and I are really used to training and also kind of, if you have questions or, comments or anything, please throw them in the chat box. The way we're going to try to operate is Kay will monitor the chat box and also I'll be doing kind of some slide stuff. So please, we want this to be as interactive as informative as possible. For what you're looking for out of this kind of series or this training today. So what we're hoping to do.
Please go ahead and just as you also write your names, it's so fun to see people from all over the country. If you want to know why you signed up for this talk, that would be great, so that we know to either switch courses to make sure we answer your questions or make sure we're getting to what you most wanted to know.
Perfect. Good call, Kay. That's perfect. And so our objectives, and we are flexible. If not anything these days, we are super flexible. We want to be able to help define what infant and early childhood mental health is. Help either deepen understanding or begin understanding about attachment and trauma through the lens of the family and the child who could be affected by substances. And lastly, we are hoping to help people identify resources and programs that are available either, within the communities that they are, or evidence-based kind of programming that is out there in the United States that could be used to help families and children that are affected by substance use disorders. And so we're going to kind of jump into things. Just with kind of a quick overview about what really early childhood mental health is. You see kind of this picture here, and you see this little kiddo kind of thinking and talking to his little teddy bear. This is everything that early childhood mental health really kind of is not.
Jess, I don't think we can see the slides.
Oh, really?
Can anyone see them? I can't see them.
No, you got to share the slides.
Oh, I thought I did. That's all right.
And we have a Marylander who joined us.
Yes. Sorry, I got distracted. Let's see. Let me start from this slide and then. Okay. How is that?
There you go.
Perfect. Everybody can see that. All right. So my apologies. See, things get a little wonky. When we're talking about early childhood mental health, we're talking about children, really kind of, under the age of 6, but we're also talking about, their primary caregivers. And there's no such thing as a baby. So Donald Winnicott kind of coined that term when he was talking about early childhood. And he's really meaning to say there's no such thing as a baby because there's always a baby plus somebody else. So a baby plus a caregiver, a baby plus a parent. And we really want to look at, you know, these, sorry, there we go. These kind of notions of helping children grow well and love well. And so Patricia Van Horn and Alicia Lieberman, they were both out of University of California at San Francisco, really talked about early childhood mental health as this capacity and really kind of looking at 3 different domains. And so focusing on a young child's capacity to be able to experience and tolerate and express a wide range of emotions. So happy and sad and mad and scared, and not having without a lasting emotional collapse. And what they mean by that is being able to be soothed or calmed, or having those appropriate relationships and attachments, so that way they can help themselves return back to a kind of a homeostasis, back to baseline. We also want to help kiddos form and maintain mostly trusting and intimate relationships. And I think also kind of one of the pieces that we really also highlight and focus is that kiddos need to learn the culturally expected skills considered appropriate for their age. And so each culture has, different skills that, a child may be, obtaining, at different, and within different families too, and expectations. And we really want to follow the family's lead and understanding what those, guidances and expectations are for them and their families and their children. So we also have to kind of look at, when we're, looking at a lot of children, I work with children in the Safe Babies Court Team program, and those children have experiences that have brought them to the child welfare arena. And so we have to really also look at kind of, what is the cost of growing up afraid? Young kids who perceive the world as a threatening place really can have a wide range of, conditions. They may, even little kiddos, have some anxiety. They may develop some attachment kind of difficulties. They also, when we'll talk a little bit later about the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, they really also can have some stress-related health problems. And we really look at kind of their behavior challenges, because this ultimately impairs their ability to learn and develop those social emotional skills that are so important to be able to develop when they're little. A lot of times, what I will say to some caregivers is they are really focused on kids learning, their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s, which is fantastic and definitely, needs to have some experience with. But I will always say, make sure that you also show your children, how to be kind, how to adapt to those social, have those social emotional skills and abilities. Because if they don't have those, then when they get to school or when they get kind of to those older ages, it could be harder for them in school. And so we talk about these in regards to kind of responses to stress. And, you guys can kind of think about even, as we kind of go through our days as an adult, there are those times that we have positive stressors. We have these brief increases in heart rate, these mild elevations in stress hormones. So literally when the PowerPoint wasn't working, I experienced a little bit of positive stress to try to figure out then how to get the PowerPoint to work, so that way you guys can see these things. And then there are those times where we have some pretty, tolerable stress, that these are serious kind of things that may be happening. They're temporary stress responses. Our body, may release kind of those, chemicals or those stress hormones, but we have really supportive relationships, or the child has a really supportive relationship. And so those things are buffered. Those experiences and, or, those stress hormones return to homeostasis because they're buffered by those supportive relationships. And then we have toxic stress, and those are really, those kind of stress responses are where there's this prolonged activation that a child doesn't have a chance to figure out kind of how to, with a relationship with a trusted adult or a protective relationship, bring themselves back down, or to really then return to a place where they are able to be calm and feel safe and secure. So, oh yeah, this is the one that goes. We talk a lot about, when I think about children and I think about kind of, all of the different things that you have to kind of keep your tabs on. Development, attachment, trauma experiences. There's so many different things that kind of come together to really influence the way, a child grows and grows well and loves well. And so, children who've been exposed to trauma expend a really, really great deal of energy trying to respond to cope with, and to come to terms with the event. And sometimes they can be, very loud about it with their behaviors, and sometimes they can be very, very quiet with how it is affecting them. And so it really, we have to look at if it's reducing the child's capacity to explore the environment and to really master their age-appropriate developmental tasks. And sometimes you'll notice that, if a child isn't kind of the squeaky wheel, like, making sure that you're still checking in with them, because they still also could have some effects of that traumatic experience. We do know that the longer traumatic stress goes untreated, that children tend to stray from their developmentally appropriate pathways. And so that's why you'll see a lot of studies that are talking about, the rate of return or the rate of investment in early childhood, not only with developmental services, but even, social, emotional, or mental health services, because we can then return them back to their path, their typical developmental appropriate developmental path. So I am going to kick things over to Kay to talk about the neurobiological kind of development piece, and I'll start monitoring the chat then. Oh, you're on mute, Kay.
Thanks for the tag team, Jess. So this is such a critical period of development, as Jess talked about. And one of the reasons is the central role that the developing brain plays in our overall health and well-being, not just school readiness, but it's really, as we'll talk about in a minute, the ACE study has really helped us to understand the critical role that brain development plays throughout our lives. So, so the brain is not mature at birth, and one of the reasons we have such a long developmental period is because we have such a big brain, and so it's a very complex brain, and so it takes a long time to develop. And what generates growth and change in the brain is experiences, and so experiences, both negative and positive, impact us greatly. And they're it's through experience that the brain gets wired up, that the cells learn to talk to each other and create neural pathways. So the critical periods are important. So what happens when actually makes a big difference. So when you're thinking about, did something happen when someone was 2, or did it happen when they were 5? It does make a difference in how we think through their development. For example, last night I met a young child and his mom, and he's now 5, but he had a critical surgery related to his gastrointestinal needs when he was 2, just at the time you're learning to potty train. So we think through those things because it helps us to map on what was happening during that child's development at that time. And we grow through relationships, and that is true in terms of brain development as well. It's the relationships with the family, but also relationships with the community that are really critical to social emotional wellness and cognitive growth and development. So there are different areas of the brain that are critically important to development. We know in the center part of the brain is where our stress response system lives, and that's essential to our survival as a species and as individuals. And the frontal cortex, the big part of the brain, that kind of lumpy gray matter that we often think of when we think about what a brain looks like, as we develop, gets very specialized in the things that it learns to do. And the way specialization happens is, again, through experience, right? You're specialists in the programs and the roles that you just shared with us in the chat box. And that's really kind of how the brain works. You know, the more you use it, the more developed it becomes. So these windows of opportunity for development remain open for many years, but it gets harder and harder to make change as we get older. So getting it right early, as Jess was saying, makes lots of not just fiscal sense, but at an individual level, it's really important. And so before we talk about adversities and trauma, it's really important to talk about resilience. And what we know is that everybody is born with a capacity for resilience. And Ann Maston termed the phrase that resilience is ordinary magic. But for children in particular, there are some fundamental needs in order for resilience to be in place. So we can't, in other words, we can't just say, don't worry about it, kids are resilient. Yes, kids are resilient, but their resilience is coupled with connection to caring and competent adults, their own cognitive abilities and self-regulation abilities, such as Jess already described when she introduced the definition of infant mental health, early childhood mental health. That is critical to resilience. Positive view of self. And this is actually, you know this instinctively, but it's really crucial to the field, that negative views of ourself and negative thoughts are really things that really negatively impact our mental health. So it's quite important to understand how kids view themselves and help them make corrections if they need to. And then motivation to be effective in our environment. We all care every day. You care about the roles that you just told us about. Kids are the same, even little ones. They like to help. They like to be effective. They like to master things. They like to learn new things. It's not only fun, but it's also critical to resilience and brain development. We'll see if this video works.
Yes,
this is from the center. If you haven't had a chance to go to the Harvard's Center for the Developing Child, it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. We'll put the link in the chat box for you. And if you, in your roles, do any training, you can always go there. They have wonderful videos and wonderful briefs and activities. And it's just, as you can imagine, a great place to learn.
Let's see. Can you hear it?
Resilience is the result of a highly interactive process between individual characteristics in the person and the environment in which that individual has developed.
It's really the counterbalancing of difficult things that may exist in the child's life with positive things that occur within the family, but even positive things that may exist in the community.
An easy way of thinking about resilience is like a scale with a fulcrum in the middle of it. And there are things on both sides of that scale. experiences of both bad things or good things.
Our genes shape where the fulcrum is positioned at the start.
There are certain genes that make a child more sensitive to the effects of maltreatment or parental neglect or witnessing violence.
The fulcrum may start out kind of more towards one side or more towards the other side, and that's going to make a big difference in terms of how much these subsequent events affect things positively or negatively.
Science tells us that experience moves the fulcrum, for better or for worse.
Even though we are born with genes, genes will respond differently to certain environmental situations as opposed to others.
What the genes are actually doing are turning up or turning down the expression of chemicals in circuits in the brain and the circuitry in the entire body that govern our responses to stress, to anxiety, to depressive symptoms.
When positive experiences accumulate and children learn coping skills that help them to manage stress, the fulcrum can slide, so the scale tilts toward positive outcomes more easily. That's what resilience is all about.
There's always an adult, or more than one adult, who is key to providing that relationship that helps to build resilience.
Thanks, Jess. One of the comments is that it sounds like luck and timing. And we don't want you to walk away with that idea. We want you to walk away with the idea that it's actually relationships. And relationships are the things that can turn the course of that. Maybe there was some bad luck, but it's relationships that can turn the course. So strengthening families is and the parents is really the pathway to supporting resilience in young kids, older kids too, but older kids have more capacities, more things they can do on their own, where young kids are in that critical role of developing. I guess the other thing about timing is that we're hoping we're pushing the issue that we don't want little kids actually can't wait, and babies can't wait. We have to intervene early rather than say, well, hopefully it'll turn out when they're older. It's actually a wonderful chance to intervene. And the thing we know the most is that interventions really work at this age. They're highly impactful. So, if you give a young child a drop or two of speech therapy, you're going to see amazing growth. If you give someone who's in their teen speech therapy, it's going to be a lot harder to make the same kind of improvements. So that's kind of the timing issue. So strengthening families through helping them get access to the resources they need for stability. But also, as all of us are probably experiencing now, the importance of connectedness to our families and communities and people that we love and can support us and enhance our lives in any way. And supporting resilience is really also helps families think about what happened to them when they were younger. That's a trauma-informed approach. So what happened, meaning were some things difficult, but also what went right when they were young. So they can make more intentional decisions about, that might have happened to me when I was younger. I don't want that for my child. So I'm going to do some things differently so they don't have that same experience. And these good things were there for me, that happened for me, that were available to me. And I want to make sure I have that for my child as well. And then the importance of positive parenting resources, whether that's groups or coaching or therapies, that can focus on that and making sure children get their developmental needs met. So if they have any special developmental delays, making sure they get early intervention. If they have any, and helping kids get the richest high quality school and childcare experience that's available.
So we have another video. I don't think I actually shared it correctly when I did it. So do it real
So it
quick.
just cues it up. Alicia Lieberman just won the Lifetime Achievement Award at the 0 to 3 conference last month. And she's a remarkable woman, mentor to Jess and I. And she's the developer of one of the models that we're going to be talking about as well.
Many people think that angels are people. And just as ghosts refer to unprocessed, unresolved feelings of conflict, fear, terror, anger, angels are moments of affective experience. And it can be with my grandma, with my grandpa, with my uncle, with my daddy, with my mommy, but those were feelings. And of course, the more people who give us angel moments, the more blessed we are.
So when we're providing child-parent psychotherapy, those are the kind of conversations we have with families to help them build their resilience and also recovery from trauma, both the parents' own past traumas or current traumas, but also with a focus on strengthening the parent-child relationship, even if some very difficult things happened within that relationship. So you're probably familiar with the ACE study by now, the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. It started as an obesity study, trying to learn more about cardiology issues in the late 1990s, and it's become one of the most transformative public health studies of our time. So now it started with 17,000 members of Kaiser Permanente asking some questions about their childhood experiences. Sorry, it's a little loud here. And now over 500,000 people have enrolled in the study, and 23 states have included these questions in their annual surveys. And the findings that I'm going to talk about have remained stable across all the expansion of this study. And later studies have included experiences of racism, of living in a violent community, growing up in foster care as well. So if you think of the 10 original questions, the first 5 really map on to what we traditionally know of as child welfare concerns. So experience of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, and also neglect, which is the most common form of child maltreatment. And then there's 5 what they called household dysfunction, which isn't really a good term, but it's really difficult experiences that families were going through. And so parent living, struggling with mental illness or substance use disorders, the incarceration of a family member, so that difficult separation, and also the difficult separations related to divorce or parents separating. And then the last one is witness to family violence, domestic violence, treating the mother violently. And what we found in these studies is this pyramid kind of helps to give a picture of what the model is, what the science showed us, which is both historical trauma and intergenerational trauma, so that these experiences are passed down from generation to generation, and are common, as well as these adverse childhood experiences. This puts people at increased risk of PTSD and later substance use disorders. And it puts children at risk of having delays in their social, emotional, and cognitive functioning. And that really kind of sets a stage for health risk behaviors like an early initiation of smoking or using alcohol or marijuana or other drugs. And that really sets the course for lifetime chronic illnesses like diabetes, obesity, and other cardiac problems, as well as chronic mental illnesses.
Sorry.
Uh-huh.
There we go. And I'll take this one. And I think,
Okay.
As we kind of, jump into, this, we think about kind of like, a lot of families that, come to the attention of a child welfare service or system really have traumatic histories and things that have happened to them. And so what I'll do is I'll put in the chat to the NCTSN really put a good kind of a one pager together in regards to, birth parents and their trauma histories, and really kind of the things that, we should be thinking about if we're working with somebody kind of in this capacity. Trauma is common, unfortunately, and we have to also then think about if, with that, each person experiences trauma in their own way, that there's no right or wrong way to display that something bad has happened to you. And so we've already talked about how, toxic and positive stress and those types of things, and that we really also, we have to think about how those reactions have been adaptive for people. That, survival, everybody's human and they're geared towards survival. And so some reactions or some kind of behaviors that, somebody may be looked at very differently, but it could be a survival mechanism for somebody who's experienced trauma. And I think the other part that I really, hold on to and also kind of lift up is that recovery is possible, and that relationships and community and personal steps towards wellness and therapies and services can help overcome, this negative piece of impact on of trauma. And so a lot of what, we talk about is, and, you guys work in the field of, substance use disorders, and addiction is a disease. It's not a choice. It's, when we're looking at what substance misuse is, the technical definition of it is that it's the use of any substance in a manner, situation, amount, or frequency that can cause harm to the user or to those around them. Prolonged repeated misuse of a substance can then lead to a substance use disorder. And that's a medical illness that that's a medical illness that impairs somebody's health and their function. And with substance use disorders, prevention works, treatment is effective, people recover. And so we'll also put in the resources, the Surgeon General, Dr. Jerome Adams, we'll put in the resources kind of a fact sheet that I think is very much, we need to just destigmatize the punitive nature of kind of what's surrounding substance use disorders, and really look and focus on what those evidence-based practices are that help addiction and help people recover from addictions. And so this is kind of the kind of, the definition, or the kind of the thing that I hold on to, is that to be able to prevent substance misuse, it really requires that we change our perspective. We must start to see addiction not as a disease, but as a symptom. Often addiction is a product of suffering, and to really have an impact, you must go to the source of that suffering. For all too many people, that source is trauma. In particular, childhood trauma has repeatedly been shown to increase the risk of not only addiction, but other health issues, as Kay helped us understand a bit in regards to talking about the adverse childhood experiences. And so, recovery is possible, and they have done, you'll see the PET scans that are up on this up on the slide right now, that it is, you cannot deny that that use changes somebody's brain. And you can't deny that if somebody is able to be abstinent from that drug or for a period of time, that it changes their brain. Their brain has the ability to recover. And I think that that's kind of one of the things that, is one of the stigmas that surround substance, is that people don't realize that the brain is, malleable and can recover from something that is a substance that it's been using. And so this then brings us to, when we're thinking about substance use disorders, and, we're thinking about, exposure then in utero, especially when we're thinking about alcohol. About 10 to 11 babies are nationally exposed to alcohol and illicit drugs in utero. Sorry, that also includes illicit drugs. And about 12% of all children in the United States live with a parent that may have a substance use disorder and alcohol use disorder. We also, I'll put in the chat too, we have a opioids and ACEs article list that if you want to do some further reading or diving into, definitely use some of those resources. But also, when we're talking about, women especially who are pregnant and are trying to manage a substance use disorder, language really matters. Just because a baby is born exposed, that does not mean they're an addict. It means that they were exposed to opioids and it's a treatable and temporary condition, and that their parent, their mother may have a substance use disorder, or they may have been receiving medication assisted treatment, which is, one of the, gold standards when people are, when OBGYNs and substance use, doctors are looking at how to implement harm reduction within a mom who may be using, who is pregnant. And so I think with those pieces, not all drug exposed, there are drug effects, but that doesn't mean that all drug exposed children are affected, that some of those effects are smaller than initially thought. Some effects can be treated. And so you'll see a lot of the physical kind of symptoms that can be treated. And then some other effects may not be apparent until later in childhood. But, with babies, the other kind of plug in, the other kind of soapbox that, I kind of tend to jump on. So that no amount of alcohol is safe during pregnancy. Nobody knows exactly what happens with alcohol other than the fact that alcohol is really bad if you drink it during pregnancy. And so to really think about how to help people, help GYNs especially understand that prescribing a glass of red wine, for their patients isn't a good idea, but that we need to figure out other mechanisms to help really stressed out moms cope with whatever's going on. And then when we're thinking about like caring for a baby with even neonatal abstinence syndrome, treating that baby in relation to their parents. That baby has been in utero, in their mommy's belly for 10 months. And that baby knows their mother's heartbeat sound. They know their mother's voice. They know all of their important people. Their hearing's developed within, I believe 20 weeks. So when you're thinking about how it's sensitive and in tune that babies, even in utero, can be to their parent. Promote kangaroo care. Try non-pharmacological care such as swaddling. Swaddling is such an amazing thing if you take some time to learn it properly, as I say that out loud. Support breastfeeding, really look at the ways that, you are treating, if you are a nurse or a social worker within a hospital, treating the parent dyad as a parent dyad, not as something that a parent may have done wrong to a child, because ultimately that child needs that kangaroo care, that support, that those symptoms or those treatment of symptoms. And so with this, we want to kind of talk a lot about, so we've got about 45 minutes. There are opportunities for hope, healing, and recovery. Programs and interventions that are focused on relationships. And like Kay said, a lot of, we can't chalk things up to a child's resilience and, they'll recover. We really need to think about how we can intervene earliest and quickest with families, so that way they learn these healthy ways of being. And so when we think about that, every parent, and I wish I could see your faces, because then I could kind of probably see if you have some head nods. Even if you're a parent, your core concern is my baby going to be okay? Even when I'm guessing your baby may be 21 or 32. And then the other kind of concern of every single parent is, am I doing a good enough job? Am I being a good enough parent? And we really need to kind of hold those kind of in our thoughts and mind, because those are the two questions that every single parent, a lot of the parents that you work with, I'm sure, ask themselves every single day. And so to kind of start with kind of ways that we can support and provide hope is making sure that we are using a way of being trauma informed. And so, we don't have power over people. People make their decisions. We can walk a journey with people, but we can't make decisions for people. And we really need to think about, and my kind of premise is not what's wrong with people, but what's happened to them. Treating people with respect and kindness and empathy. Because ultimately, when we are coming to somebody using a non-trauma informed approach, we are going to lose every opportunity that we have to be able to help shift or to help be on that journey with them. And looking at things, you've heard us kind of talk within trauma lenses and development and attachment, that we really need to look at things through a trauma lens and understanding behavior through a trauma lens. And so not only understanding, what a child is doing and why they may be doing it through that trauma lens, but also reinterpreting behaviors that may be happening for a parent. A parent that, avoids coming to a meeting with you. If you work at the local Department of Social Services or DYFS or whatnot, they may just be avoiding the fact that you want them to meet you somewhere where they don't want to be. And so thinking about and working with and trying to follow, someone's, even a parent's lead as much as possible to help them feel comfortable with continuing and to deepening that relationship with you. Trauma, we've talked a lot about, how trauma affects adults. And so even if we kind of dive into the weeds a little bit and talk about, somebody who may have a history of experiences, it can compromise a parent's ability to make appropriate judgments about, their own and child safety and appraising danger. This is also another National Child Traumatic Stress Network brief that I saw Kay put the other one in the chat, and she looks like she's looking to find this one as well. I just saw a really good question. Thank you, Barbara. That just caught my eye, and I totally, we'll talk about that in a couple minutes too. And so really it makes it challenging for parents to form and maintain secure and trusting relationships kind of with anybody. When you have your own disruptions in relationships, and then you're looking at and trying to manage, maybe, this kind of negative, behavior from, your child, or trying to then find appropriate discipline techniques. This is all really hard if you are trying not to parent the way that you were parented. I think a lot of people also probably have, had some experiences with, parents who've had a really hard time trying to regulate their emotions, and really thinking about how that may be, it's not about you, it may be about the situation. It's probably about their experiences. It may be that's how they know to reflect, or to, to be able to give voice to their thoughts and feelings that are in their heads. And the other part that we have to really think about too is, trauma reminders or triggers. I think a lot of people really kind of hear the whole trauma triggers, that sometimes, even as adults, people have a tendency to be triggered. And so if a parent is having an extreme reaction to a situation that, when you're looking at it, might not be that big deal in, the grand scheme of things, it may be really something that is being triggered within them because of their own experiences or their own trauma histories. And so these, we have to really look at, in addition to that, how systems, so specifically the child welfare system, can be really re-traumatizing for parents who have histories of trauma. It removes their power. It removes any type of say that they have over their child, but that there is a way to connect even when it feels like it's the darkest hour and a child is removed from their parent. There is recovery, and there is ability to be able to provide those reunification services and to really strengthen the parent's resilience and the child's resilience. And so, when we're working with adults, and I think this is actually just kind of good in general to think about with kind of anybody that you work with, because we don't know what experiences, as a professional that I bring to the table, or that Kay brings to the table, or Nicole, or anybody. But understanding that if somebody is responding to you with anger or fear, or avoidance, it might be a reaction from their own past. And really holding that benevolence and that good intention, because parents are not bad, and that approaching them in a way that's punitive or trying to tell them what they need to do is going to more than likely worsen a situation rather than motivate them. And also it could potentially worsen their relationship experience with you. And really every parent, I feel, has the desire to, they want their babies to be safe. They want their babies to grow well and to love well, and build on that desire for their child. Everybody has hopes and fears and dreams, and they usually involve their children. And so thinking kind of, if we are to dial things down into what you could do every day, those are some of the things that, be able to hold in mind, but also, and I wish we would have added this now that I think about it, be able to find a space or a relationship that you have that you feel that you can, either professionally and or personally recalibrate and reflect upon, and to really have somebody kind of in your corner. So when things get hard, that you have your secure base to go to. Because ultimately, as, we talk about, like, if your cup's only half full, then, how can you, be able to pour into other people? We say that for parents and kids, but ultimately we have to think about that for ourselves and for the people and the families that we work with. And Kay, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk about the really innovative situation you have going with Baltimore City's infants and toddlers team.
Well, actually, Jess was really the person that helped us pilot this, and so we're trying to get it back on track. But if you think about it, if you know what early intervention is, it's called different things in different places, but it's part of the Part C services of the Individual with Education and Individuals with Disability Education Act. If you're familiar with like IEP, so Individual Education Plan, this is the downward extension of that. So this is starting at the earliest, with infants and toddlers. And when you think about it, it's an entitlement program that all children in the country are eligible for if they have a developmental disability. And so we've tried to work with them to highlight that infants and toddlers have social emotional needs as well, and that incorporating either social emotional screening and assessment, and also resources and interventions to really start at the earliest time. So children that are referred from child welfare or have a plan of care that's related to substance exposure in utero are kids that should be referred to their early intervention services, where they can get those critical developmental services, keep their development on track, or get them to reach their full potential. But they also have the resource of care coordination, people that work with them to help them get other services. And then they along with their pediatricians, monitor their child's development. So they're really a critical partner. And Jess will talk about the next one.
Sorry, I felt like I was a little premature in my sliding. So I had the incredible opportunity of being a community coordinator with the 0 to 3 Safe Baby Court Team approach. And really this approach is looking at child welfare and the court system attached to it to address the urgent needs of infants and toddlers and families, and to build protective factors and mitigate those risk factors that really need to be addressed. And it's a very much individualized, working with individual families kind of system, but it also then has the ability to touch and change, systems to be able to be more responsive to infants, toddlers, and their families. And so we have this infographic, and we really use this approach to for children who are ages birth to 3 under the court's jurisdiction, which means that they may be in foster care or kinship care, or under what Maryland calls an order of protective supervision. And our goal is to advance their health and well-being of very young children and their families so they flourish. So to do that, we want to be able to find the services that work. So the services that have the evidence base. So we're not sending, mom to some type of, parent education program or therapy that doesn't work. It's wasting their time, which is incredibly valuable, because if you know within the child welfare system, if a child is out of care for 15 out of 22 months, it is federal law to be able to then move forward quickly, because children can't wait. So it is not fair to parents to send them to a service that doesn't have evidence that it works. And we really promote this healthy development, support building family resilience, and building the community's capacity to prevent child abuse and neglect. So a lot of the outcomes have shown that there's been an increased coordination of early childhood preventative services, new policies and procedures that ensure equitable services. Attachment relationships are nurtured and protected. Parent protective factors are strengthened. Early childhood development is on a healthy track, kind of what we talked about before. And even within these communities, that children and families that participate in this type of program have better outcomes, and that it leads to systems improvement. And so we do this using a multiple core components. And our goal is to use concurrent planning. So basically, instead of one plan for a child, we have multiple ones going at the same time. Evidence-based practices. We also want to minimize the placement changes. We don't want a child to bounce around to more than, if they have to leave their parent, we want them to be able to land in the next either kinship or resource parent family and stay there until a decision is made about what's going on with their plan. We don't want them bouncing around. access to mental health services, early intervention services, comprehensive and consistent health care for the child and the parent, and post-permanency services and supports. And so, I have a approach for core components that I can also share in the chat. So we have judicial and child welfare leadership. So this program is critically important. You have somebody who is a champion from your child welfare field, as well as your judicial. You need a judge that supports this in the courthouse. You have a local community coordinator, which I have the pleasure to do. You have to have an active community team that basically is your stakeholders. Who in the community can help, can you use to be able to bolster and help the families that you serve. We also have pre or post, well, they call them pre or post removal conferences, and sometimes other people call them family involvement meetings. And every single month we have a family team meeting. Typical child welfare doesn't have that for families. And so we meet with families every single month to see what's kind of happening, what they need supports with, what other things that we need to demonstrate to show that this child is safe and this parent is safe and that the child can return home. Or do we need to, have conversations and help parents make tough decisions? Because that's what parents do, is make tough decisions. And sometimes those decisions include permanency or finding alternate plans for, of care for their children. So, some of the stats that are coming out of the Safe Baby Court team approach through 0 to 3 is that, 90% of children had identified in need of service had their first appointment within 30 days of referral, which is pretty astonishing. And that's 75 or 70% of that receive child parent psychotherapy within 30 days of an appointment. And really focusing on that Safe Baby children in care only had 1 or 2 placements. So 94.2% were in care less than 12 months, and 79.4% of those were in care between 12 and 23 months. So let's take a look, and just to kind of give you a flavor of kind of how this approach works, Judge Patricia Clark, who has retired, was so gracious in letting people kind of film her and her when she was kind of interacting with a mom that was having a difficult time.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I've been better.
Yeah, where you been?
Not doing my services.
That's right. But I'm delighted to see you today.
Yeah. It's time to face the music.
Yep, it is. So talk to me.
I'm not doing so good.
Okay.
But I made it here.
Yep.
And I'm honest about it. I'm ready to do what I need to do. So it's about where I'm at right now.
Okay. So where do you think we should start?
I don't know.
All right. I need you to stay in contact with your social worker.
Okay.
Twice a week.
Okay.
Okay? That's it.
I got it.
Okay? If I can get you to stay in contact long enough for us to get you stable, it's going to be a lot better.
I hope so.
Yep. Trust me. Just stay on the telephone if you need to. Okay? So we're going to start this little process.
Okay.
Baby steps.
Good.
Yep, baby steps.
That's about all I can handle right now.
That's okay. We're not going anywhere. Baby steps.
Okay.
Okay? And one of those baby steps is to keep showing up here.
Okay.
Even if it's bad.
Okay.
Okay? If you can get it together to keep walking through that door, we can get there. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
So Judge Clark,
Compassion makes me teary-eyed. It's so powerful.
right, like it's you can see, even a judge has the way to, okay, what's been going on, let's be real, but thank you for you're here. Keep engaging in these baby steps. Just show up, because ultimately she's giving those opportunities. And so that I wanted to, kind of give a flavor of, things are not punitive. We don't want to come across as punitive. We want to come across as supportive, but also being able to, make sure that the realistic kind of ideas, there are realistic things that are coming up, and that balance of helping parents and caregivers achieve the services, mitigate those things that brought their children into care, but also to make sure that babies don't wait. It is a fine, I keep on thinking of the fulcrum in my mind. It is a fine line to kind of walk. And so we meet parents where they are. We nurture their relationships. We build social supports in the community. We build social supports with the resource parents that may have, their child, and they become mentors to families. We really advocate for, instead of using the words, visitation, we really advocate for quality and frequent family time. That babies have, in utero babies have been with their mother for 24/7. And so we need to make sure that they still continue the connection and hopefully then increase, this bonding and attachment, because we know that the more time that they have together, the greater the chance of reunification. Research has shown that. And so we really need to also then have a system that's committed to continuous learning and continuous quality improvement. And so the other, we'll have Kay tag in, there's another approach that we'd like to share with you guys too.
So Linda Gilkerson and Dr. Larry Gray and Erickson Institute in Chicago developed this model for engagement. And I think it's so relevant to what we're talking about today. It's just talked about meeting families where they are, is really essential. And the judge just so compassionately, demonstrated that for us. And thank you. So many people mentioned, her compassion. And so this is the facilitated attuned interaction. So the idea is real attunement, really keeping the parent's urgent concern at the center of your discussion, and being able to talk about feelings, using calming approaches, then kind of set the stage for more collaborative thinking through together, not just coming quick to salute decisions before they're really, ready or even, a good fit. And then building people's capacity to create their own plan and to lead their own recovery and support them in their rightful place in their family as the parents or head of their family. And then the last idea is, just to take a pause and reflect together about what the time together has felt like, and what next steps folks, parents want to use out of the discussion. And the nice thing about the FAN approach is that it's peer-to-peer. Folks have been trained to use it. Doctors have been trained to use it. Mental health folks have been trained to use it. Home visitors, child welfare workers. So it can become kind of a universal language or approach, particularly to for families that are experiencing very significant stress. Thanks, Jess. And so, thinking about how do we move forward? So as we've described already today, oops, I think you're the PowerPoint. Oh, there we go. As we've described already today, we have to both hold the parents' needs in mind and also the child's. We made the child a little bit bigger here because babies and toddlers, their needs are bigger and they can't really take care of themselves on their own. So we want to find solutions that match that picture, right? We want to find things that work for parents, things that work for children, like the early intervention services we talked about, for parents, trauma-informed recovery programs, but also for the relationship. And that's that 2-generational approach where everybody gets what they need. The parent gets some of the resources and support that they need. The child gets what they need, and we do that through strengthening the parent-child relationship. So the best practices in infant mental health programs. So when you're looking for those programs or you're partnering with them, the practices should first and foremost promote safety and protection, and should also focus on not managing children's behavior, but supporting healthy relationships between children and parents. Support social emotional development. So folks should know about what young kids need at those ages so that that part of their developmental growth can be actualized. Focus on resilience, like we talked about earlier, and coping resources and skills, and increase access to and coordination with family and children's services. So Jess gave probably the most complex and beautiful example of what that looks like in Safe Baby Court. But we'd like to see that in all kinds of things. We have in primary care settings and in early care and education settings. So bringing mental health services to programs and to where families with young children are. And of course, we want to always be asking about trauma and resilience. So we introduce you to Alicia Lieberman, who is the developer of child-parent psychotherapy. And this is one of those wonderful examples of a 2-generational approach. The research shows that the children's PTSD symptoms greatly improve in this model, and the parents' mental health, including PTSD, also improve, not quite to the level that the child does. So, recommending further treatment for parents might be necessary. But the most amazing finding is that that quality of the parent-child relationship, which we call secure attachment, is stable over years. So some families can get some improvement with some parenting classes, and that can be great. But what's really critical to wellness and recovery from trauma is that strong attachment, that strong relationship. Jess, do you want to talk about Piplo Productions?
Sure. So Chandra Ghosh-Ipin is a co-developer of child-parent psychotherapy, and she and her husband started writing children's books. And so her books became so kind of wildly popular that they created kind of what they called Productions. And so if you go onto their, if you Google it or go onto their website, we can put that in the chat too. They have all of the books, and they're really geared towards helping kind of talk about stressful situations. The new one's called Mama's Waves. Oh, I should have gotten it out. I can find it. It's fantastic. It talks about a child who is absent, or their caregiver is kind of absent from them, and you could kind of tweak it to what you want to use it as. But it could be used in foster care kind of situations. And it talks so eloquently about how sometimes, Mama's waves are just too much for her. And sometimes she might miss time with her, with the little girl. It's just really, really powerful books to be able to be used in ways that, you don't need to use them just in like mental health therapy types of sessions. You could use them. I've used them with my own son before. When sometimes things get, hard, we talk about things that can, be scary and his reactions. And Chandra's also put a lot of kind of thoughtful resources on as far as kind of like webinars and readings, but also actual kind of concrete materials that she's developed little like finger puppets, and it's a really good kind of wealth of information if you're able to check it out. And so let's jump over to I think this is our last video talking and I think highlighting a lot of what Kay was focusing on when thinking about the fan and a two-generational approach.
We start in child-parent psychotherapy with what we call a foundational phase, which is helping the parent tell us their perception of what happened, but also tell us about what happened to them when they were growing up, because then we can make connections between what happened to them as children and what is now happening to them as parents to their children. And we can help the parent feel that we're not there as accusers, we are there as people who are deeply committed to relieving their pain, so that we really are working on a two-generation approach. We know that parents do not want to hurt their children, and that in finding themselves in a position of hurting their children, they are enacting the ghost in the nursery and the suppressed emotions of rage that they continue to experience that now get triggered. And when we help them reconnect with that pain, then there is a sense of, I never realized that I was carrying all that. There is a release of feelings that have been suppressed for decades. And then there is a new empathy for how the child might be feeling in response to the way the child is being treated by the parent. And a new sense of, that is not the experience that I want to give my child. That is what we call angels in the nursery.
Yes.
Is creating experience of loving connection and safety by realizing how much the pain of the past had been active outside of consciousness.
So you can, why we are always humbled by Alicia. She has just this eloquent way of bringing words to concepts and being able to share those. And so, Kay, did you want to talk about mom power and then healthy steps?
Sure. So the other strategies, I was happy to hear that someone said that they had a family safe baby court in their program and they used the fan. So it's nice to hear that these effective models that work are spreading. Another couple ones I'd like to talk to you about, and hopefully you could bring these to your community or try to connect to them in your community if they exist. Mom Power is a wonderful attachment-based group model developed by Maria Music in Michigan, and really helps parents learn, it focuses on self-care for parents, which is really critical, and then helps them learn more about being a secure base and safe haven for their babies and their toddlers, and really focuses on nurturing parents so that they can then nurture their kids. We're doing this in a recovery program. We're on our third group, and it's been really well received. And we've done it in our addictions outpatient program too, and it's been well received. And at the end of the group, the moms have a parent-child moment and activity with their young ones. So it is a real, though it's a little more focused on the moms, it has that two-generational approach where you give the parents the moms a chance to both feel empowered about themselves and and less critical of themselves, and give them that chance to connect with their babies in the group. So that one has been going quite well, and you can learn more about it at the link there. The other model that we have 2 Healthy Step sites in Maryland, and this is also a program of 0 to 3 where Jess works, and you place an infant mental health specialist in primary care offices, because that's another place where babies and their parents show up regularly, particularly during the first couple years of life, particularly when they have so many vaccines and well baby visits to monitor their development. So this model also has amazing outcomes, including, which is very important nowadays, increased immunization rates, increased rates of attending well child visits, as well as supporting parents around some of the trauma concerns. We also use the FAN within that model to help engage families. And the goal of the Healthy Steps National Office is to serve 1 million children. And so they're really, if you go on their website, you can see the map of how fast they're growing. So this is another wonderful example of a 2-generational brief intervention. And so lastly, we've gotten a grant through the Department of Justice. They have Victim of Crime Assistance Fund. So I definitely encourage you to keep your eye out for that funding mechanism. And they had a recent grant application that we thankfully got, so that we could bring these treatments that we're talking to you about today into, outside of the traditional outpatient setting, and bring the services to where the families are. We'll be doing a needs assessment, so it can also be driven by mothers' voices, really listening to them about what their needs are. I think couple critical things we've already learned is that there's a lot of roadblocks, 1 related to stigma, and 2 related to traditional recovery programs, that moms have had trouble getting acceptance of medication assisted treatment, which is the evidence-based treatment for opioid use disorder. So we're learning about that and trying to help spread the word about how important that treatment is, particularly to prevent death by overdose. The other thing we've learned is that the traditional parent groups don't really have the necessary ingredients for parents that are struggling with addictions, disorders, because they're very much focused on finding pleasure in your relationship with your child. And 1, your child might be very fussy and colicky related to the in utero exposure, and 2, the addictive substances have hijacked that pleasure center in the brain, and parents need different parenting strategies, to make those critical connections that are needed for attachment. So we're modifying some of the work that we're doing to take that into account.
So kind of to end our time together today, and thinking about, how we can support children and families in healing together, what are some of the things that you could do? And, really finding partners, finding champions within either early childhood agencies, and just looking at different ways to collaborate, focusing and advocating for evidence-based approaches or treatments or programs for children and their families that you serve. Advocating for programs that allow children to safely remain with their families during treatment. understanding and advocating for tools to recognize, treat, and support children and their parents affected by trauma to lessen the lifelong impact and to promote healthy families. And kind of lastly, because, you know, we don't have enough work to do, really look at ensure families have real and timely access to services, whether it be, you know, parenting groups or evidence-based kind of parenting groups or prevention efforts or treatment, because ultimately, if somebody is saying that they need help now, their motivation to engage in that service is critical right then and there. It's not critical 20 days from now. It's critical at that point. And so we share with you, you know, if you would like to do some more further trainings, there's definitely, you know, the Center of Excellence program, that in infant and early childhood mental health. So the Institute for Innovation and Implementation also has for information about like systems and early childhood and CEPHL, more kind of consultation types of activities. The NCTSN that we keep on referring to is amazing. It's not only just focused on children of all ages, not just 0 to 3. The Institute on Trauma and Trauma-Informed Care. You have Georgetown, who has the Trauma-Informed Toolkit, and of course SAMHSA. If you want to learn more and kind of research those evidence-based interventions that we keep on kind of referencing, here are the places that you can go to look at the evidence-based interventions, practices, or programs that might be available, you know, to uptake, and, you know, you could become a champion for one. And lastly, you have my contact information. You can send Bree an email if you want, or if you would like, I can, you know, if you have a question for Kay, I can kind of help with that too. You know, reach out. We are always excited to be able to help partner and create those kind of interconnected webs. Sometimes you don't realize that there's only like 1 degree of separation, I feel like, in this world right now, Zoom calls. So please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We really appreciate it, and all of the conversation and the chat and the hard work that you guys are doing.
So I want to say, this is Nicole, I just want to say thank you for this really wonderful information. No matter how many times I hear about trauma-informed care or ACEs, you know, there's always something else you can kind of learn to infuse in the work that we all do in supporting families, because it is about the whole family, the child, the parent, extended family, whoever it is. And so thank you for this really great information that you provided us today. There is 5 minutes, so if anybody has any questions, you have 5 minutes.
I don't exactly have a question, but I did want to share that this is exciting for us as well up here in Alaska. I feel like we're really on the cusp of making some big changes in our child welfare and the support we're able to provide families, and really making a difference in changing things kind of on a daily basis. I sometimes feels like the changes are taking too long, but I get inspired when I see what is happening across our, you know, just across the U.S. as a whole. And I think that knowledge is power, and the more of these, I think getting some knowledge out there to people that have been struggling and maybe not doing things the way they always have, because they don't know there's a newer, better way that's going to work, and usually typically make our jobs easier in the long run. So I'm really grateful that I was able to be here, and that my staff is able to be here. I appreciate what you guys are doing.
We appreciate you and the work you're doing in Alaska. There's some NCTSN colleagues out there too. I hope you can connect. Josh, Eric, I can't think of how to pronounce his last name at the moment, sorry.
Kay is also by shock trauma, so you'll hear lots of sirens. Yeah, what's Josh's name? I can't even remember it either.
It's like Avedon, can't think of it. But if you go onto the National Child Traumatic Stress Network website and look up Alaska, you'll be able to get connected to the folks in your state.
Yes, and if and Kelly put in the chat that she was asking about resources for 0 to 5 to be able to share with court and DHS. If anybody wants to shoot me an email, I may have too many resources. So if you have a specific ask, like let me know, because Kay knows I will purge everything to you that I have. So if you have something specific, or if you don't care how much you get from me, just let me know.
I also wanted to comment on the question about psychotropic drugs for young children. I believe all the states now have a monitoring program to reduce the inappropriate or off-label use of medication for children of all ages. But I think young children have benefited by that. And I guess there are some approved medication situation, particularly for children with autism. So, just it's a tricky question to ask, and we're not doctors, so we don't want to go too far, but you could go to your state Medicaid and ask about their monitoring program, and they should have information for you.
And I think also kind of like what I've found that sometimes when being there with a parent who may be saying that they're having some difficulties understanding or whatnot, kind of, what medication is and what they're thinking about, what questions to ask the doctor or whatnot, being able to kind of, again, be on that journey with a parent. Sometimes it gives them the ability to really connect with their gut if they feel like something's kind of not right. And so asking, helping them ask questions about, what's going on. Because I think that sometimes providers, have all the best intentions, but don't realize that sometimes when they're talking to parents, and I've felt this myself before, that sometimes we don't understand the reasons nor like why you want to do something. So, or why, you want to use a certain medication over, another, or even that you're suggesting medications. So sometimes it's hard to advocate for if you're a parent who doesn't feel, that level of comfort kind of pushing back on a professional. You may have, may feel more comfortable if you have somebody in the room with you or virtually, you have a relationship with you that you trust.
And with that being said, since it's 4:15, I just want to echo that, Jessica, because I know in my work at SPAN, the Parent Center for New Jersey, we enforce that greatly, that parents are the professional in their child, whether that be it's school things, doctor things, just question it, right?
Yes.
Because the doctor can only do as much as the information that you give them. Right. And same thing with schools. They can only give as much to your child as information you give. And so we as parents, professionals, everybody have to empower ourselves enough to say, you know what, I'm just going to ask the question. Right. And to be able to facilitate that conversation. And just one more thing, like my son has a developmental disability, and I shared a little bit earlier, and he was born at 26 weeks. The doctor said, oh, he's going to have a brain bleed. I said, what is that? Told me all about it. And he does have mild CP with a cognitive developmental delay. And now he's 20 years old and he's doing very, very well. But what I did was learn all about how his brain functioned with his brain injury. And so every time I went to the doctor or worked with a physical therapist, talked to this one, I was learning. So after a while, when I'm talking about how people would say, are you a nurse? I'm like, no, I just learned a lot about how my son's brain functions, how his muscles work with his body. He went to Shriners Hospital for Children in Philadelphia, worked with a lot of researchers and the doctors, and just asking a lot of questions. So I knew how to help him have a healthy life. And just one more thing that happened to me when he was about 5. It took him a while to start walking. A physical therapist told me at that point in time, she said, well, just because he's starting to walk, I think it's like 6 or 7, doesn't mean he'll continue walking when he's 15 or 16. He may want to just succumb to a wheelchair. And I looked at her and I said, how could you make that determination? And I was like, well, that's not an option. My son is a walker. He's a CP child, 20 years old, who walks. And, but I did a lot of work to push through those barriers to say, yes, I want PT in my house, and I want all these things, and continue to do that. So, and I say that as a parent, raising 2 children as a single parent, and have another child with a learning disability who had some mental health struggles. She's in college and she's doing well. It takes a lot. It's a lot on ourselves. But the other thing is we have to take care of ourselves, right? And I have to remember to do that because I forget to do that. So kind of wrapping that whole, self-care piece in there. So thank you. Thank you for all this information. And thank everyone for being here today, even with some of the tech glitches, but we made it. We got it.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Thursday, you'll get more information for Thursdays, probably tomorrow. So we want to thank everybody for being here.